China's Air Force is patrolling Taiwan again, this time with its largest fleet per day ever. Amid growing tensions there, a U.S. carrier group has entered the South China Sea. At the same time, Australia is spending over $170 million on a naval base upgrade. And limitations on South Korea's missile range have been lifted, expanding their reach to Beijing. An internet VPN and a study abroad experience in Taiwan. That's what shifted one young man's outlook on the communist system he grew up in. But as he tried to learn more about the outside world, something changed his life forever. On the eve of the Chinese Communist Party's 100th anniversary, control measures are escalating. Drones are grounded in Beijing, while even pigeons are blocked from flying there. And inside a confession booth in a new state-run history museum, visitors are encouraged to speak freely about the Chinese regime, but in front of a camera. Welcome to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Chinese military jets are patrolling Taiwan on an unprecedented scale. This, according to the island's Air Force. On Tuesday, an official report from Taiwan outlined air activity inside the island's Southwestern Air Defense Identification Zone, called the ADIZ. The information shows that China's Air Force flew almost 30 military jets into Taiwan's airspace. Some even flew from the southwestern zone to southeastern ADIZ zone before turning around. This marks the largest jet fleet to enter Taiwan since last September. That's when the Taiwanese military first released reports about Chinese military jet activity in its air defense zone. Data released says the latest fleet involved 2 slow military aircraft alongside fighter jets and bombers. But in past flyovers, China's military only sent out its Y-8. It's an anti-submarine aircraft mainly used for maritime patrol and general transport. Taiwan's Defense Department responded quickly, sending out air patrol forces, radio warnings, and air defense missiles. A U.S. aircraft carrier group has entered the South China Sea as part of a routine mission, the U.S. Navy said on Tuesday. Supercarrier USS Ronald Reagan leads the group. This is the carrier group's first time in the South China Sea this year. The U.S. Navy said while in the South China Sea, the strike group is conducting maritime security operations, which include flight operations with fixed and rotatory wing aircraft, maritime strike exercises, and coordinated tactical training between surface and air units. They added that carrier operations in the South China Sea are part of the U.S. Navy's routine presence in the Indo-Pacific. The Navy statement also said the move is to uphold U.S. alliances with regional allies and to demonstrate U.S. Navy's ability to quickly respond to any contingency across the region. U.S. warships have passed through the South China Sea more frequently in recent years. This as the Chinese Communist Party, or CCP, is building more artificial islands and air bases in the area. The U.S.'s move is likely a show of force against Beijing's unlawful territorial claims there. The U.S. is removing an almost decade-long range limit on South Korea's ballistic missiles. This means the country can now build missiles that can reach a number of cities in North China, including Beijing. This comes amid the Chinese regime's expansion of its nuclear capabilities, and after the U.S. reinforced its alliance with South Korea in a meeting last month. So far, Beijing has not protested against the move. From now on, South Korea can build missiles without any limits on range, up from a previous 500-mile cap. Having more well-armed allies could prove to be useful for the U.S., particularly as chatter of military conflict increased recently. The U.S. had such range limits on South Korea since 1979. At the time, the limit was around 110 miles. In 2001, the U.S. increased the cap to about 185 miles and upped it again in 2012 to 500 miles. Even with the freedom to build missiles, South Korea is unlikely to make nuclear ones. That's because the country has signed onto the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. It's an international treaty that limits nuclear armament. The Australian military is going to spend over $170 million to help Papua New Guinea upgrade its naval base. The head of the Papua New Guinea military says the investment is in response to China's growing presence in the region. And the upgrade will significantly improve the country's maritime security capabilities. An Australian company has been awarded the contract, and the project will also involve members of the U.S. Navy. Construction was due to begin this month, but the CCP virus pandemic delayed it. And about 20 U.S. Navy engineers have also been evacuated from the construction base for the same reason. The project will also include improvements to local roads, power grids, and training facilities. When the works are done, Papua New Guinea will double the number of troops on that island to 400. And Australian troops will also be able to use the base for joint exercises and monitoring programs. U.S. Congressman Chip Roy from Texas introduced a bill last Friday that would ban members of the Chinese Communist Party from owning land in the U.S. Roy says this bill would ensure Texas land will never come under the control of the CCP. In a statement, the congressman warns that the CCP's quest for global domination and their direct investment in the U.S. economy pose a major threat to Americans' way of life. Data shows that 30 million acres of U.S. farmland is owned and controlled by foreign investors. A China watcher is warning about a recently proposed Chinese wind farm project next to a major military base in Texas. He tells the Epoch Times American thought leaders that the project poses national security risks and hidden hazard.
When American hedge fund manager and China watcher Kyle Bass flew to a Chinese-owned wind farm in Texas, the Chinese staff that received him there appears frightened. The Chinese worker welcomed Bass to a car at the landing strip, but something unexpected happened.
And he casually pointed across the front of the cab and pointed at the gate and said, that's where the Chinese headquarters in Texas happens to be. And I said, excuse me?
Bass was shocked, but the Chinese receptionist said it was a joke.
And I said, stop the car. and he said, no. They have cameras everywhere. They'll come after me. And I said, we're in Texas. Stop the car. No one's coming after you here.
The wind farm's strangeness caught Bass's attention. Retired Chinese general and billionaire Sun Guangxin bought over 130,000 acres of land in Texas, including this giant wind farm. But there's not a lot of wind there. Instead, it's sitting right next to a major U.S. Air Force base.
We would never build a wind farm where this one is. And so there's a strategic reason this general has acquired all of this land, and he did it, again, in an insidious way.
Sun is the richest person in China's Xinjiang region, and his company has been buying up land in Texas since 2015.
He got a local businessman out of Lufkin, Texas, to front for him and purchase all the properties. So none of the landowners knew they were selling to a Chinese general.
Sun has a net worth of $1.9 billion and was also the vice chairman of a CCP youth federation in Xinjiang. The proposed wind farm site is just about 30 miles from the U.S.-Mexico border. U.S. lawmakers and experts are also raising national security concerns over the project.
My view is that the reason that he bought the wind farm and wants to put up 700-foot turbines is he plugs directly into our electric grid. Well, plugging directly into our electric grid is something that should never happen.
In addition to the Texas power grid failure in January, several cyber attacks have targeted America's critical infrastructure in recent months.
We are fully certain that the Chinese and the Russians, the North Koreans and Iranians want to disrupt our critical infrastructure. We are certain that they want to do that and that they have the capacity to do it.
Earlier in April, a U.S. annual threat report found that the Chinese regime's cyber capabilities, at a minimum, can cause localized, temporary disruptions to critical infrastructure within the United States. The Texas legislature recently passed a bill banning companies from hostile foreign regimes, including China, from engaging in any critical infrastructure business in the state. The governor only needs to sign it for the bill to become law.
Coming up, a study abroad experience in Taiwan and a VPN service made a Chinese youth rethink the communism society he grew up in. But as he tried to know more about the outside world, his life changed forever. More on that after the break.
Don't let YouTube decide what information you get. That's your choice. YouTube is deleting our videos and cuts you off from a source of honest reporting. Make sure you don't lose access to NTD's news content, and take a quick moment to subscribe to our newsletter so no matter what happens here, you'll keep your access to a trustworthy news source.
Just a little taste of freedom made a Chinese youth rethink the communism society he grew up in. But the wish to know more about the outside world brought him danger and forever changed his life. And DiDi's Penny Zhou reports.
You may have heard of VPN or virtual private network. It disguises your IP address when you go online and tricks the internet into believing you are in some other locations. In America, many people use them to watch Netflix shows only available in certain countries. But in communist China, using VPNs is much more serious than hurting the feelings of Netflix. People may end up getting arrested by Chinese police and have their lives ruined for it. And that's exactly what happens to Chen Yuzhen, a 24-year-old recent college graduate. He has escaped China and now lives in South Korea. To protect his identity and the safety of his family and friends who still live in China, we gave him a pseudonym.
I thought China should be more open by now. What kind of era are we living in? Things that are that absurd shouldn't happen, but it did happen to me, myself. That's when I realized how dangerous it is to use a VPN.
Chen got in trouble for using a VPN to get around the Chinese regime's internet censorship called the Great Firewall. The virtual wall blocks Chinese residents from accessing websites that contain contents critical of the Chinese Communist regime, including YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. But Chen wasn't really watching anything that should strike the nerve of the CCP. He used a VPN mainly to follow YouTubers who make lifestyle contents.
It was really just life-related, but they still wanted to control me. I was not watching anything political. Seriously, I used to be a little pink, and I never cared about politics.
Little Pink refers to young Chinese netizens who are fervent supporters of the CCP. They lash out against anyone who criticizes China or the Chinese regime, both in China and abroad. But Chen started to gradually change his views after he went to Taiwan as an exchange student. Communist China has never ruled the democratic island, but has long claimed it as its own territory. There, Chen witnessed a different way to care about one's country.
One time, there was a Taiwanese student group saying they were going to go to the Luodong or Yilan municipal government to protest. So I just followed my classmates and went there. We set up camps in front of the government building. My classmates and I were there. We were helping and encouraging each other. And then I just felt so touched. I realized what it's like to care about social issues.
He was also amazed at how the Taiwanese people react to different views.
When I was in Taiwan, I told people there were good things in China, or I talked about a lot of things they didn't like, but they would not attack me. They respected different views.
After going back to China, he started to comment online about social problems once in a while. He felt he was just voicing his opinions in a rational way and said nothing out of line. But Chinese police thought otherwise.
My account on Chinese social media Zhihu was shut down, and then my WeChat account was also shut down.
And one early morning last June, plainclothes police officers broke into the apartment he and his friends shared and started searching. Everything was turned upside down in no time.
I asked what department they belonged to, but they refused to answer. They just kept searching everywhere and looking for electronic devices, mobile phones, and others. They asked if I had connections to any foreign forces, whether I had joined any organizations, and so on, which I really had not. Then they asked if we had any foreign classmates or friends that we keep in touch with and asked us to show them. That's when they saw we have a VPN app on our phones and some chat history which we didn't delete. They saw it all.
The police also found out Chen had shared the VPN software with others, and that made them even more unhappy. Chen eventually faced a criminal charge that may land him up to 7 years in prison. Chinese officials claim VPNs are permitted in China, but they have to be approved by authorities. The Chinese regime in 2017 cracked down on unauthorized VPNs and arrested multiple people. Beijing then officially criminalized unauthorized VPNs in 2018. For Chen, it was not easy waiting for his sentence.
I was really anxious. Every day I could not sleep well. If you are sentenced because of a criminal charge, your life is tainted. And I think this isn't good, because it will have an impact on the future of my next generation, my son or daughter. It will affect them if they were to take any exams or if they want to enter the government for work. So out of such considerations, I thought I should escape that place.
Although he was forced to go into exile, Chen said he doesn't believe it's sustainable for the Chinese regime to impose social control by arresting people.
There are just so many people bypassing the firewall nowadays. If you want to arrest them, you will not be able to arrest them all.
Chen has since started a YouTube channel where he shared his views on social issues. His latest episode is titled, "Loving China is not the same as loving the Communist Party." Penny Zhou, NTD News.
Beijing is banning drones in most parts of the city, and authorities detained a local resident for breaking the ban. That's because the CCP's 100th anniversary on July 1st is approaching. The party declared the day a national holiday and planned mass celebrations and other activities. And now they are taking extra efforts to make sure there are no disruptions to the events. The Beijing Bureau of Public Security announced that they detained an elderly resident over the weekend while he was flying a drone in an open area. It happened in one of Beijing's core districts that houses the majority of foreign embassies. Beijing's official notice from last Friday says that from June 13th to July 1st, the city urban districts are set as clear sky restricted areas, meaning it is forbidden to launch drones, planes, and other aviation models. Kites, balloons are not allowed either, and there are also restrictions on how bird owners can fly their birds. The notice says pigeons in a certain district must be kept in captivity, while in the other 8 districts, pigeon owners cannot let the birds fly from 6 a.m. to 3 p.m. Beijing is not the only city that bans drones and birds. A Chinese drone company posted on social media that 3 other provinces and 2 major cities, including Shanghai, all issued similar notices. And their bans are even longer than in Beijing. They already started earlier this month and will end in mid-July. Another Chinese network also revealed that central China's Henan province also issued a similar notice. A new CCP history museum in Shanghai is opening its doors. In it, the museum set up a video message booth in order to celebrate the CCP's 100th anniversary in July. The sign on top of the booth says, "I have something to say to the party." Inside the booth, visitors are encouraged to speak freely about the CCP, but in front of a camera.
这可以的，心里有话对党说。
According to the organizer, the booth caters to young people in the internet era with a self-service operation system. After recording, visitors will receive a unique code. They can scan the code to watch their recorded videos and share them on social media. The organizer will also publish some videos that they consider the best on its website every day. Shanghai authorities and local TV station invented this confession booth. Vodafone has chosen Samsung to supply its 5G network in Britain. It's a major boost for the South Korean company in Europe and a defeat for China's Huawei. Executives from 5G providers in Spain and France have also held talks with Samsung. Britain is preparing to remove all Huawei equipment already installed in its 5G network because of national security risks. Samsung says it's banking on Europe to maintain growth in the space. It's currently dominated by Nokia, Ericsson, and Huawei, but Samsung hopes to build off its U.S. success after a recent Verizon deal. Moving into southeastern Europe, Romania's president signed a bill into law on Friday. It bars Chinese telecom gear company Huawei from the country's 5G networks, citing security concerns. The bill stems from a memorandum between the U.S. and Romania in 2019. The memo blocked companies controlled by a foreign government and that lack a transparent ownership structure from 5G networks. A number of major Chinese companies are thought to fall into this category. The U.S. sees Huawei as a tool used by the Chinese Communist Party, aimed at enforcing the regime's global surveillance system. Huawei has denied spying for the Chinese state. China's answer to Uber, DiDi, has filed to go public in the United States. It's said to be the biggest Chinese offering in 7 years. And DiDi's Patrick Hayden has the story.
China's biggest ride-hailing firm, DiDi, unveiled its highly anticipated IPO filing in the US Thursday. It's expected to be the biggest stock market debut of the year. It's backed by Asian tech giants SoftBank, Alibaba, and Tencent. Sources told Reuters DiDi could seek a valuation of nearly $100 billion. That would make it the biggest Chinese offering in the US since Alibaba went public in 2014. The company is bouncing back strongly from last year, but it says continued tensions between the US and China could affect the business. The US has delisted a number of Chinese tech firms on security grounds. The company also says the Chinese regime's tech crackdowns could restrict its business. Chinese regulators have already fined DiDi this year for alleged monopolistic practices. The company plans to list on either the Nasdaq or the New York Stock Exchange. Patrick Hayden, NTD News.
A former UK trade minister is pressing his government to name and shame businesses that trade in China's Xinjiang region. It comes amid concerns over Beijing's human rights abuses against Uyghurs and other minorities in the region. Here's NTD's Jane Worrell with the details.
Foreign Office Minister Nigel Adams says the UK government is disturbed by reports of how Uyghurs are treated in Xinjiang, but MPs are pressing him to take more action. A former trade minister says it's time to shift businesses out of the region.
I suspect the Chinese government doesn't care a damn what we say in this chamber, but they do care about what British business is doing, and if British business withdraws business as a result of human rights violations. There are plenty of other friendly countries like India that can do anything China can do. So what has the minister done to summon in these businesses, to name and shame them, and to say they should move their imports and exports for China?
He said those businesses in China are no better than the slave traders of the 18th century, who he says built their businesses on the backs of misery. In response, the minister says the government has provided guidance for businesses in Xinjiang.
Guidance, they need to understand the moral, reputational, legal and economic risks of conducting business in Xinjiang. It is for businesses to reassure themselves and their customers, Mr. Speaker, that their activities in no way contribute to human rights violations taking place in Xinjiang.
The remarks came in response to an urgent question in the Commons from former Conservative leader Sir Ian Duncan Smith. He raised concerns that relatives of witnesses who gave evidence at a recent Uyghur tribunal were coerced into giving false statements to Chinese state TV. The tribunal, led by prominent human rights lawyer Sir Geoffrey Nice, is assessing if the Chinese state is committing genocide in Xinjiang.
I attended the tribunal and I saw images of mass crematoriums and a young mum who was incarcerated for a couple of years. Her triplets were returned, 2 with marks around their neck and 1 was returned as a frozen corpse. And for her bravery to give evidence to the inquiry, she had her family paraded on TV by the Chinese authorities. The right thing for the minister to do would be to support publicly the tribunal. Otherwise, we end up as the United Nations, a broken flush when it comes to holding China to account.
Adams says his officials will study the resulting report from the Uyghur tribunal very carefully. There are MPs from both sides of these benches who are saying it's time to take a stronger stance against the Chinese state. Jane Worrell, NTD News.
And that's all for today's China in Focus. But before you go, we have a special report on China's transplant industry. In it, we lift the veil on the mystery surrounding China's source of organs and look into what's happening behind the curtain. For years, China's organ transplant industry has been matching patients with organs at speeds unimaginable in the West. In some cases, finding 4 hearts in 10 days or 2 livers in just 24 hours.
So how are they able to have this quote-unquote on-demand transplant system that's capable of extremely short times? The only way they can be doing this is if they have another source of living donors that are available on demand.
They become anonymous prisoners of conscience, and that makes them extremely vulnerable because they can disappear at any time without a trace.
This isn't just a totally China-contained crime. There's complicity in what China is doing throughout the world.
Our medical community could become accomplices to this horrible, terrific tragedy.
Be sure to check out the special report on Epoch TV. China in Focus is partnering with the platform, and that's where you can watch our exclusive content every Friday night. In them, we'll explore questions like how China lures in foreign companies to steal their technology, how the Chinese regime is actively collecting health data on people around the world, how the ancient Chinese philosophy of good governance differs from the current-day communist regime, and much more. Be sure to check out these investigative episodes by clicking on the link in the description down below. And don't forget to subscribe to this channel if you really want to understand what's happening with China. You can still watch our Monday to Thursday episodes for free on YouTube, NTD Cable TV, the NTD website, and the Epoch TV website. Thanks for watching, and see you tomorrow.